to the revelry of being in song together make it an unforgettable experience.
General Assembly is the national coming together of Unitarian Universalists from across the United States and Canada, and even including representatives from around the world. This year, it's going to be held virtually for the second time in a row, and I think that represents a great opportunity for UUCA folks. On the one hand, because it's virtual, it is more financially accessible and just travel wise accessible than when it is wherever it might be in the other parts of the country. And if you still need help with some of that financial cost, we do have funds at UUCA to be able to help with that. We want to make sure that it's as accessible as possible. And because it's their second time doing it virtually, they'll really have had that format down. Lots of ways to engage online, different ways to be in chat rooms and engaging with the workshops and with the speakers. And General Assembly has great workshops and speakers. You'll find everything from social justice to church administration, great speakers, including national names. This year, Stacey Abrams and Desmond Meade are going to be offering the Where Lecture, which is sort of the big main lecture. And I think that'll be amazing, and is really, their presence is in a lot of ways a testament to the work of UU the Vote.
Hi, this is Ashley Grieve. I attended General Assembly as a delegate last year, and I think my favorite part is that you get to vote if you're a delegate on resolutions or elections and really be a part of shaping that national community.
Beyond the workshops and the lectures, it's a wonderful way to get a sense of what Unitarian Universalists are thinking about and the decisions that we're making, and actually to be part of making those decisions. So, in particular, if you are one of UUCA's delegates, and because we're a larger congregation, we do get a lot of delegates, so we have a lot of power to be able to bring to that decision making process. If you are one of UUCA's delegates, you can vote on things like actions of immediate witness or other social justice positions for the movement at large and for the UUA Board of Trustees. This year, there is somewhat unusually a contested election for the UUA Board of Trustees, and so it feels especially important for UUCA to have as many of our delegate slots filled as possible so that we can make an informed and thoughtful decision about who we want on the UUA board leading the movement into the future. General Assembly is a great way to feel connected to Unitarian Universalism. And it also is a lot of fun, even online. In fact, it was in last year's first virtual General Assembly that they instituted the now annual GA Drag Show, which was a super fun time for everyone. So I hope that you'll consider being part of General Assembly and consider being one of UUCA's delegates as well. Please do reach out to me if financial assistance would be helpful. I can find some funds to help out with that. And reach out to the nominating committee, nomcom at uucava.org, if you'd like to be one of the delegates. Or if you just want to go to GA and go to some of the workshops and hear the great speakers, you can sign up and simply attend. We hope you'll consider one of those options, and I will see you around the virtual halls of General Assembly.
Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. I'm Amy Shepard, a member of the Board of Trustees. Welcome to our service. Today is Question Box Sunday, and if you were to ask me two things about myself, I might answer, I'm a cheerful person, and I love the band The Smiths. Now, if you know that band, you might think it's strange to hear the words cheerful and The Smiths in the same sentence, because they are known for their depressing, bleak songs. In fact, every year at the Black Cat in DC, they have a night where they alternate songs between The Cure and The Smiths. It's called Cry Fest, and it's amazing. But my favorite song by The Smiths is actually an incredibly upbeat, happy song called Ask. If you haven't heard it, go listen to it after the service. It's one of the most sunny, optimistic songs I've ever heard, and it's playful. Here's how it starts. Shyness is nice, and shyness can stop you from doing all the things in life you'd like to. So if there's something you'd like to try, ask me. I won't say no. How could I? I love this song because it is about the positive power of asking a question. It captures optimism, possibility for change, trust, and curiosity, and it makes you want to dance. The lyrics also speak to that moment in asking a question where you may feel shy. You wonder, oh, is this a dumb question, or are people going to judge me? But today, and really always, Reverend Amanda is channeling her inner Morrissey, that's the lead singer of the Smiths, and encouraging us all to be brave, reach out, and ask. I know that she shares the song's positive and welcoming view of questions, so ask away. Your question may be a chance to learn something new, or it may be a chance for all of us to consider something new, an exciting possibility for growth and change at UUCA. After the service, join us for virtual coffee hour, where we can talk about our answers and ask more questions. Enjoy the service. Thank you to those who have served, and have a wonderful Memorial Day.
For our opening words and chalice lighting this morning, I give you the words of Julian Lepp. This is called Open to Unexpected Answers. We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deepest questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, and welcoming of multiple truths. May it be so.
Good morning, everyone. I thought we would start by singing together, even though we can't sing together. And this is a copycat song, and I'm sure that you all know it. It's We Give Thanks. I sing a part, and then you just repeat it at home. So please sing along with me, and we might change some of the words. Just fair warning here. All right. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for the time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Here we go. Oh, we give thanks for this cloudy day, for all gathered here and those far away, for the time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks Wish I could hear you.
Well, I am so delighted to be able to do one of my very favorite kinds of services, which is a question sermon. And we decided, since we're live this Sunday, with those of you on Zoom and streaming to those of you on Vimeo and Facebook and YouTube and the website, we decided we wanted to make more than just the sermon a kind of interactive experience. And so you can see that we've invited you to share your requests for hymns. You can put those right in the chat. We've already gotten a request for Wake Now My Senses and for Blue Boat Home. We actually pre-prepared Blue Boat Home because we knew that was going to be on the list. And so folks are doing that. If you want to send me a question in the chat, just send it in a direct message to me to make sure that I track it correctly. And I will try to work it into the sermon. And Reverend Walter and I wanted to have a little bit of interaction and improv for the Time for All Ages. So you may or may not know that both of us have some background in theater and in particular in improv work, though I think that Reverend Walters is much more significant than mine. But here we are. And so we want to invite you to help us tell a story. We'd like you to put in the chat, we are looking for a location, an object, and an occupation to tell a story in this time for all ages. A location, I see, oh, nope, Finlandia is a hymn request, not a location. Baker, okay, we've got it, our first three. So Reverend Walter, we have a baker in Key West, Florida, with a wheelbarrow. A baker with a wheelbarrow in Key West, Florida. Will you start our story?
Well, you see, the thing is, when you're in Key West, Florida, as a baker, there is one thing that is expected of you, and that is to be able to produce the perfect key lime pie. Now, the problem with producing the perfect key lime pie is that you have to find the people who can help you make this pie. This is a big community effort because you need to have the flour, you need to have the limes, you need to have the whipped cream. There are so many things that need to be brought together to make all of these key lime pies for people.
You know, Reverend Walter, I'm thinking as you talk about the importance of key lime pie about this one particular baker I heard about who lived, as it happens, in Key West, Florida. And of course, as you've said, needed to perfect her key lime pie. It needed to be just perfect. But the thing is, she had recently moved to Key West. And so she didn't have all of that community gathered together to help her to make the key lime pie. In particular, she didn't know a single key lime vendor. In fact, and this is really awful to admit, but when the baker first made the key lime pie, she used plain old regular limes. Can you imagine?
What?
West Florida. I know. Well, I mean, that's why it's such a dramatic story. So the baker was feeling really lost. How could she find the proper key limes when she was new to the community and didn't have any of those connections?
Well, the great thing is there's an underground key lime community in Key West. It's called the Limey Society, right? And the best way to get to know the Limeys is, of course, to make the offense of making key lime pie with regular limes. So what happened to our baker friend, whose name is Angela, by the way?
Right.
Angela, in the middle of the night, heard a strange sound. And that's when she saw that she was surrounded by key limeys, the bakers.
Now, what I love about the key limeys is that although you might imagine that this story is about to take a sort of somber, concerning twist, right? She's committed the ultimate offense and is now surrounded in the middle of the night by the group of limeys. in fact, the Limeys really worked from a restorative justice model. And so rather than punishing bakers who use the wrong kind of lime, they come together and call the baker into right relationship with key limes, with the key lime tradition, and with the limey community. And so they weren't gathered around her house in some sort of, you know, angry mob. No, they were gathered around her house in a kind of limey circle of love.
Well, and what they did is they had to come in the middle of the night, see, because they had to take her to where the key limes were, the best key limes. And they brought her through this dark, mysterious underground tunnel that led underwater to another island where there were plenty of key lime trees that had the most tart and sweet key limes one could imagine. And she was like, I would love to use these limes, but there's no way I can make this trip over and over again. And
that's right, just when Angela thought that her problems were solved by the limey community of love, she was up a proverbial key lime tree yet again.
Right. And do you know the love that the Limeys had for producing key lime pie for everyone? Do you know what they did for Angela? They let her borrow their biggest wheelbarrow so they could bring the limes, so Angela could bring them back to her bakery. And Angela was known as one of the best key lime bakers. And in later years, she became a limey herself, finding ways to bring key lime love to all who wanted to bake in the keys.
It is truly a beautiful story and has been written about so much. I'm sure many folks have heard it before, but I think that it did really, it deserved the retelling that we offer today. So thank you, Reverend Walter, for that, and thank you for our folks who suggested that obviously well-known story about the Limey community.
Yes, the Limeys of the dark. So as you can tell, we have fun with the stories, right? And many of you know that one of the keys of improv is yes and. Right? You notice how Amanda and I kept trading back and forth, building on things that we had set up for each other, right? We didn't say, actually, her name wasn't Angela, her name was Beatrice, right? We didn't do any of that negating, right? We affirmed, we gave yes to everything. And that's one of the things that we have to remember when we work with each other. Assume good intentions. Assume that there's things that we can build upon, and assume that we can add to them. That is probably the second most important part of improv. It's not just, as Liza is saying, give a yes to everything. The yes is important, but what's the really important part of improv is to give. You don't come into a scene and just mirror what's been said before. When you come into a scene, you add. This is what's so great about what we're doing today. Today is a day about adding ourselves into the sermon, asking what we can to help make our community, our church community, a better place for all of us. What do you think, Amanda? Is there something that you'd like to add to improv, or is that?
I think that's exactly right, Reverend Walter, and I am so glad that we had the chance to have a little fun this morning, and I thank you for all of the folks that participated, including by laughing, because what is improv without an audience? So.
And I would really also like to add, if any of you know where to get a really good key lime pie in this area, I would appreciate it.
All right, so hit Walter up with your key lime pie. I actually think they're best homemade, Walter. So, but and thank you so much, Reverend Walter, for that wonderful story. Friends, in addition to laughing together, we come together when our hearts are full, as they so often are. Today, I am particularly noticing and honoring two markers of the United States' community life together. Monday
And the
and
General
Tuesday
Assembly
mark the
is
100th
meaningful to me
anniversary of the
because by being in
1921
community with over
race
4,000 new
massacre in
youths
Tulsa,
from around the
Oklahoma.
country, I am
And
overcome
so
with a
we
feeling of
think
being a
of
part
our
of
siblings
something
in
bigger than
Tulsa
me.
who are marking that
Every part
time
of
and of
General
the history
Assembly,
of
from the
our
diverse
country.
ways of participating
And
in
this
worship,
weekend is
to the
also
calls to fight for
Memorial Day,
social justice,
an
to the
honoring
revelry of
and
being in
observance
song
that
together,
actually
make it an
began
unforgettable
as I have
experience.
heard the story
General
told
Assembly is the national
as
coming together
freed
of Unitarian
people who had been
Universalists from across the
enslaved
United States and
set
Canada, and
aside
even
time to honor
representatives
those
from
who had
around the
died during
world.
the Civil War.
This year, it's
Memorial
going to be
Day
held
ultimately
virtually for the
expanded
second time in a
to
row,
honor
and I
all
think
who
that
had been
represents
lost
a
in
great
military
opportunity
service.
for UUCA.
And so
folks.
today, as we
On
take
the one
a
hand,
moment
because it's
of
virtual,
music
it is more
and
financially
quiet,
accessible
and then move
just
into a
travel-wise
time of prayer and
accessible
meditation,
than when it is
I want to
wherever it
invite
might
you
be
to share in the
other
chat
parts of the country.
anyone
And if you
who
still
is
need help
on
with some of
your
that financial
mind.
cost, we do have
If
funds
you
at
would
UUCA to
like
be able to
lift it
help
up
with that. We
into
wanna
the
make sure that it's
community
as
gathered
accessible
here,
as
folks
possible.
you are rejoicing
And
with,
because it's their second
or
time doing
folks
it
you
virtually,
are
they'll
grieving
really have
with,
had that
please do
format
so.
down. Lots
And
of
I
ways
invite
to
you this
engage
Memorial Day in
online,
particular
different
to
ways
share
be
the
in chat
names of
rooms and
any who
engaging
you
with the workshops
remember
and with the speakers.
on Memorial
And
Day.
General Assembly has
Sophia, will
great
you play for
workshops and
us
speakers.
as we do that?
You'll find everything from social justice to church administration, great speakers, including national names. This year, Stacey Abrams and Desmond Meade are going to be offering the Where Lecture, which is sort of the big main lecture.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And thank you to the folks on Facebook and YouTube who are letting us know about some of our stream challenges. We're grateful for your patience and grateful for our tech support folks who are so quick to fix that. I am grateful as well for the names that are lifted up here in our Zoom chat and as well in YouTube. I wonder if you will join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life and love, God of many names and beyond our naming. Spirit of community that gathers around us as we gather. Today we lift up names of those gone too soon. Names of those lost in World War II, during Vietnam, in armed conflicts through the years. We remember together in this community that works for peace and justice. We remember those we have lost. We remember too all we have lost, the sorrows that hold our heart captive still, the joys that deepen our connection to each other and the world. Spirit of life and love, surround us in our times of remembering. Help us to know that to remember is to put back together. That to hold a name in our heart, even as we feel grief or loss, to hold a name in our heart is to hold love. May it be so this Memorial Day weekend. May it be so always. Amen. Sophia, thank you so much. And folks on Facebook and on YouTube, at least, I did put the link to the Zoom in there if you'd like to come join us in the room where it happens and where it isn't streamed out to anywhere, bypassing one of the potential tech challenges. We'd love to have you do that. And thank you so much to all of you who shared in various chats about those you are thinking of this Memorial Day weekend. I want you to know that I have looked at each of those names, and I am grateful that you are sharing them in our community here together. Well, this kind of sermon, the question sermon, is really one of my favorites. Of course, in part, that is because what preacher doesn't like to think that everybody wants to know their opinions on things? But in part, and more seriously, it's because I really love seeing what questions the congregation has for me, what you all are thinking about. For me, it is an opportunity to take the sermon, which I always endeavor to think of as a conversation, right? You know, I share something and then I hear back from you, usually in the receiving line, but sometimes in our virtual life through email or messages or in the chat as we watch together. And we have a conversation together about whatever it is that I've presented. Well, this gets to reverse that process, to flip it, to have the conversation begin with you. And so I am grateful to those of you who sent me questions ahead of time, who shared in the chat as we gathered with a question. And I am sure I won't get to every question. So if you are one whose question doesn't appear here, feel free to send me an email and ask for an answer separately. I'll be glad to do that. I'm always grateful to get your questions and to know what is on your mind and heart. So I thought we would start off with something just really nice and low key this morning. Given the current potentially lethal threats to our democracy, what are ways that people of goodwill can effectively push back? Not really so low key, but indeed on people's minds. I'm actually going to take an easy way out for this question and suggest a book to you. But the book itself will be easy because it is really quite short. Several years ago, I read a book called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. It's a little tiny book, almost feels like a long pamphlet more than a book, and I really do commend it to you. Timothy Snyder talks in the book about sort of historical lessons around tyranny taken from the last century and makes 20 suggestions for what, just as this questioner put it, people of goodwill might be able to do to preserve democracy in a time of, I will note, kind of global potential threats to democracy in different places. There's a side note that there's a whole service that could be created around true democracy and representational democracy and how well democracy functions in sort of unfettered capitalism, but that wasn't the topic of this question, so we'll save it for another day. All 20 of Timothy Snyder's suggestions are great, but there are 3 that I particularly remember and will share in answer to this question. One is the importance of supporting the free press. So whether that is as you are able, purchasing print newspapers or paying to get past the firewall or reading them and sharing articles from the free press, I think that particular piece felt important to Timothy Snyder. So I'll pass that to you. I will say again, side note, whole service to have around sort of how one manages the press to make sure that there's accuracy and truth in it, which we've learned a great deal about around social media sharing. Nothing is uncomplicated, is it? But that piece around the free press felt important. Another one that I recall in particular is the importance of supporting community institutions. And I don't recall it only because churches are one of the community institutions that Timothy Snyder pointed to as important for the fabric of society. I think about all of the institutions that I support, like the YMCA, which is both my gym and also provides programming for marginalized or at-risk children and youth, and also creates kind of community spirit in its events and in its gatherings and regular programming. So supporting the community institutions that are part of your life so that they can survive. And that's, I think, been particularly important through COVID, as so many of those institutions, like the church too, have had to really alter and change. And then the third, I think also has been important during this time, particularly as we emerge from our kind of COVID turtle shells. And it's in some ways the simplest one. Timothy Snyder suggests that we connect with neighbors and with strangers, that we build the simple bonds of community that happen when we get on a bus and say hello to the person sitting near us, or chat with the grocery store clerk, or say hello to our neighbors. He posits that in situations where tyranny really came to sort of the forefront of a community or a country's life, it was those bonds between neighbors that saved people when they would otherwise have been in significant danger. The sort of societal repair and building up of bonds through the simplest of acts. So those are the 3 that I pass along. I do recommend the whole book to you. Again, it's called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. The next question was a good one, and I got sort of a follow-on question in the chat today, so I'll try to incorporate the two. It was asking me to talk a little bit about the continuum, if there is a continuum, between the strong justice orientation of Unitarian Universalism or Unitarian Universalists and the apparently growing or renewed emphasis on spiritual development. The original questioner says, I sometimes see this as being between sort of rational secular humanism and spiritual or religious mysticism, but not always, and there must surely be other ways to view this. This is a great question that acknowledged the complication right in the question. That's how you can tell it's a UU question, right? Even our questions are complicated. I really like the continuum idea that this question writer used, because sometimes what I have experienced is that people actually hold up the idea of sort of a justice element or a justice orientation and a spiritual orientation as a divide, or even as choices. You have to pick one or the other. Whereas the reality is that the whole of our history as Unitarian Universalists has included both of these orientations, and the interplay between them and the way that they are really deeply connected, I believe, to each other. The chat question I got that I thought really did kind of weave into this question was, it just said Unitarian head and Universalist heart, discuss or agree, or what, is that true? And I think that is a common conception as well, right? That our historic ancestors, the Unitarians, who were in general more regularly connected with sort of the intelligentsia of Boston, right, or of New England, that our Unitarian ancestors really were focused on intellectual rigor. Indeed, the concept of Unitarianism, of the unity rather than the Trinity of God, came from their biblical scholarship, came from their close reading of the Bible. And that our Universalist ancestors were really focused on more of a heart orientation. And indeed, their original heresy was one of the idea of universal salvation, the rejection of hell, right? And that came out because they believed that a loving God would never fully separate God's self from the world, and so surely hell could not exist. Now, I would say those are both examples of deductive reasoning. They're both, sort of logical ways of looking at the world, and they both hold the potential for really deep love and heart orientation. So I would say that there may be some historic reality in that Unitarian head, Universalist heart piece, but that in reality, life is not so dualistic, right? Remember that the Unitarians historically were where transcendentalism was seated, this kind of wild, wacky, and beautiful belief that God is everywhere, the divine is one of us, we need no mediator between us and our experience of the oversoul, which I would say is a distinctly heart orientation. It's a feeling and emotion. And so I do think that this idea of sort of the intellectual and the heart have always been part of both movements and part of Unitarian Universalism. And so too has been the continuum, as the original questioner asked, between sort of a justice or action orientation and a growing emphasis, or a renewed, as the questioner experienced, emphasis on spiritual development. In fact, and we're going to refer to this later in a later question, the very first denominational action or resolution around abolition came from the Universalists, not the Unitarians. We think about the Unitarians as being perhaps more about sort of right action, but it was the Universalists who made that choice. The Unitarians remain divided around abolition all the way through their history. So, okay, let's see, getting back to the original question, if we've got a sort of continuum here, I think about it not as a specifically Unitarian Universalist continuum, but really a human one. Every religion has some kind of impulse toward action, as well as some impulse toward introspection and reflection, connection with the divine. And so I don't think, I'm not sure I would say it's one or the other, or that the justice orientation is humanist in particular. In fact, I think of one of our more famous modern Unitarian Universalist humanists, Bill Murray, who died several years ago. He was certainly someone who worked for justice in his ministry and in his life. But his most significant contributions, I think, were actually around spirituality and theology, around humanist spirituality in his book, Reason and Reverence, and a more recent book on naturalistic religious humanism, which was the way that he described his spiritual orientation in the world. I think often when we think about this continuum, what we're thinking about really is what is getting the most airplay, for lack of a better word, nationally or even in a congregation. And I think there it's fair to say that over the course of history, we see pendulum swings, right? Where what seems to be the core orientation is around action and justice and even perhaps kind of intellectual engagement in that action. And then we'll see sort of a correction, right? And the pendulum will swing back and we'll really see a lot of engagement with spirituality and with the divine or with our core consciousness within. And then we'll have a correction again. So I see those pendulum swings over time. I know that when I look at a month or at a year, I do seek to have kind of a balance over the course of the Sundays of sermons and services that really focus on an internal experience, on spirituality, on our own development, and ones that are primarily oriented toward justice work and engagement in the world. And to me, if we have either of those without the other, and really without those two things being in some way connected, we won't neither they'll both be anemic. Let's put it that way, right? Like both of them will not be as full as they could be without their balancing pair, and really, as I said, sort of without those things being woven together in our own thinking and understanding of the world around us. Okay, let's see. Just gonna should have had a glass of water for this one. So then I had two related questions that is related to each other very much. And so I'm actually going to sort of look at them together, but I think also related to the question we just looked at about spirituality and justice. So the first question was that people can agree on the sort of what of social justice, meaning peace, equity, freedom from oppression, like the big whats is how I interpret that, without necessarily agreeing on the how particular policies or actions, even within marginalized communities themselves. Sure, any community might have difference of opinion on the how. How should you use balance taking a stand on social issues, which often includes vocal support for specific policies or actions, with honoring the principles of right of conscience and free or responsible search for truth and meaning? So if we have different how orientations, basically, how do we act, right? And what's the balance between that action and sort of being able to make space for the broader what that we might share? And then the other question was a little bit more pointed, but I think getting at the same thing. These questioners could tell me later if I was wrong on that. I've always struggled with how we balance the intention of being an open, welcoming, and inclusive community with our own interpretations of UU values. So that interpretations I think of as the how, right? I've met more conservative folks who attended a service and thought they connected with the 8 principles, but felt that the sermons preached liberal political sentiments, the implication being that preaching liberal political sentiments is a bad thing. This is all in the question. I wonder how you feel about our responsibility to be open and welcoming to those who are on the fringes of our generally liberal community. Do we have a responsibility to allow others to challenge our views and interpretations, or are our values simply what they are? And if you don't view them as we do, then for the most part, you simply don't belong. So I'm seeing those as related in the sense of sort of coming and agreeing on this broad message of principles, which both of the questions really articulate well, right? Folks that kind of broadly agree with the 8 principles, with the values of peace, equity, and freedom from oppression that the first questioner noted. And then, and this is sort of the UU version of the devil is in the details, right? Then sort of disagreeing about exactly how we go about that, sometimes really significantly disagreeing, sometimes disagreeing on sort of, just what's the most effective way to move forward. And so again, I think this relates to that question about justice, and we're actually going to return to some of the ideas around abolition in our history, because one of the things that I like to note for folks, I hear this question a lot, and I've heard it more and more over the last, let's say, several years, maybe even over the last decade, as we have felt, I think, in the United States, that the political landscape outside of congregational life has felt more divided. And so I want to offer just a little historical grounding, because I think that actually this question has been struggled with for all of Unitarian Universalist history, and is in other religious denominations as well, right? So often we think this is sort of a UU question. Well, ask my friends in the United Methodist Church, where they are mightily struggling with how they interpret the Bible, particularly around homosexuality. They have people who are in covenant with each other with very different understandings, and likely a move toward a split denomination. So denominations struggle with this, right? How far can we stretch, while retaining sort of the capacity to take action? So I wanted to ground us just a little, and I looked up some of the history around abolition. This is from the Tapestry of Faith adult curriculum called Faith Like a River, citing work by Conrad Wright, who wrote one of the definitive histories of Unitarianism, A Stream of Light, I think it's called. Should have looked that up. Conrad Wright has suggested, I'm quoting, that most Unitarians fell into one of 3 groups. Those influenced by the prominent abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison, who acted for the immediate cessation of slavery. Those who sought a gradual end to the institution of slavery so as to minimize disruption of the social, economic, and political order. And those who opposed slavery on moral grounds but resisted making a political commitment to end it. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that any of the particular justice issues that feel like they are part of our current thing or our current reality are just like abolition. I just want to point out that this movement has held the question of how much we stretch as a movement when we take action, whether or not everybody is with us, how different congregations make free choices around that action, that has always been a part of our historical struggle, and what it means to be a covenanted community. I also think about this in a much more recent version of events when I was working in DC with the Washington Interfaith Network. We had a very broad coalition of people, many different congregations, who were working to have DC and businesses in DC invest in neighborhoods. Everybody agreed. That was the what that we all agreed on, right? Neighborhoods needed more investment. The baseball stadium was coming in, and we were trying to work against the baseball stadium originally, thinking we didn't need to spend money on a new stadium. We needed to invest in our neighborhoods in DC. Well, it became clear that the stadium was happening, and the leadership of that organization decided that rather than continue to work against the stadium, they were going to switch tactics, and instead they were going to organize so that when the stadium came in, it would include an investment fund for neighborhoods, that was going to be part of the deal, and then they would support it. And that was a huge dilemma for many folks in the organization. Not everybody agreed that that was the right tactic. So from sort of deep, huge moral questions, right, around abolition, and then the very kind of relatively small and practical, tactical questions about how we organize. Those spectrums of belief spectrums of how we take action and what it looks like has always been a part of Unitarian Universalism and of other justice and religious movements. I think that in part what these questions are really asking is who is welcome and how the congregation's language and justice positions help some to feel welcome and others to feel potentially unwelcome. And so I do want to note that any congregation is going to hold a spectrum, right? People that are in different places, probably not on that big what, the way the questioner noted, but certainly on the how, on what that looks like. I want to be clear that there are some positions that I personally consider to be incompatible with Unitarian Universalism, positions that actively deny the inherent worth of other people. That's a boundary for me, for our faith. But outside of that, right, if that's the boundary that we set, there's still a fair amount of room. How do we as a people figure out how our ideals, the what that we share, encourage us to act in the world, encourage us to be in the world? That's the spectrum place where we are. All of that said, I get it. Every Sunday morning, somebody gets up and says something, right, that shapes our conversation. People can agree or disagree. They can be inspired or not. They can take up the organizing mantle or not. But ultimately, there is a power in the pulpit, in the beginning of the conversation that comes on Sunday morning. I think about a church I know that describes itself as something like radically welcoming, unapologetically Christian. Meaning, right, that seekers are welcome at this church, atheists are welcome at this church. Absolutely, they can find a home here. And the message that they hear on Sundays is going to be a Christian one. They shouldn't come to the church thinking that they'll hear a seeker or an atheist message. They'll hear a Christian message. The church is articulating that its welcome is broad and that it has a particular orientation as part of its core community identity. And I wonder sometimes sort of how does that relate? What would that look like? How might we create that tagline within Unitarian Universalism? Just practically, I do think it's some of what happens in UU congregations. I want to be clear about another thing, which is that you will hear me preach for specific work and for specific justice movements to take action in particular ways, to choose a how, right? I'll suggest hows that get toward the what, just as many of you do in your justice work or in your lay-led sermons or conversations at UUCA. Sometimes I'll preach against policies that I think are harmful to the dignity and worth of all humans. But you should not hear me denigrate people who believe differently. That I strive never to do, or to suggest that they are stupid or bad for thinking in those ways. For me, what's really important about Unitarian Universalism is that it is about the behavior, the action that we seek to see in the world, the way that we treat each other, not about the belief, but about the actions that we take and how people are included and their worth held up in those actions. And then I wanted to add just a final note, because this question, particularly the second one, really focused on people who found themselves on the more conservative end of the spectrum at UUCA, or perhaps thought they were outside the spectrum. That was I think, the articulation of that second questioner. And I want to note as well that the question could have been written about people on the other end of the spectrum, about folks who wonder why UUCA doesn't take more radical justice orientations, or why we have so far to go in terms of our understanding of systemic racism, or why we remain majority white as a congregation, or why we have work still to do understanding gender as a spectrum and not as a binary. There's always going to be a spectrum here, and people that wonder if they're on the fringes, people that feel like really they are outside the boundaries of the community, and then relational work for us to do within as we seek to move forward as a covenanted community. That space there is one of taking action, right? We don't want to take no action, making space for reflection and learning, listening to each other, acting again, kind of a cycle of practice and reflection, praxis. Okay, that was a big question. Whew. I think I have two more here. We'll see how we're doing. As I look at the ministerial staff of UUCA, and I think this questionnaire is looking as Reverend Walter leaves at the end of June, and as we welcome Reverend Carol Thomas Sissel in August. I see women only. So she's looking at, when I think about the ministerial team, I include myself, of course, the assistant minister, the ministerial intern, and our commissioned lay minister, Diane. This questionnaire goes on. I think the staff should be multifaceted in all ways, including gender. How do you plan to address this? So I have 3 answers to this question. Okay, answer number 1 is super short. As we're saying goodbye to Reverend Walter and to Laura as our ministerial intern in September, we will be joined by another ministerial intern, Greg Bonin. And when Greg joins us, that will return some gender diversity on the ministerial staff. So that's the sort of first answer, practical logistical one. My second answer comes to me from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it's the answer that most often comes to mind. I get this question frequently. I have through my whole ministry some version of this question. And so I turn to this quote from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. When I'm sometimes asked, when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? And I say, when there are 9, people are shocked. But there'd been 9 men, and nobody's ever raised a question about that. So as I've gotten this question about whether there shouldn't be more men, usually is some version of the question on the ministerial staff. I think about that answer from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I do feel that it is an important and valid answer. I think, gosh, call me in 2,000 years, right? When we've had 2,000 years of matriarchal leadership in the church, because we sure had 2,000 years of patriarchal leadership in the historic Christian church that led to ultimately Unitarian Universalism. And I think about the ways in which male leadership in the United States and globally is still so clearly the default, the standard, that women's leadership can feel unusual or marked. I am certainly aware that I am the first ever called and settled senior minister of UUCA to be a woman, with gratitude to Reverend Beth and Reverend Teresa, who served in the role in an interim capacity, and I think really paved the way for that. And so the second answer here, this Ruth Bader Ginsburg answer, is maybe a challenge to think about how we understand and experience gender, and who is seen as being able to speak for everyone. Certainly, there are multiple religions in which it is still literally true that the female clergy person, let's say the female pastor, only teaches women's classes or pastors to women, whereas the male pastor can teach and serve anyone, right? So there's a second question in there, kind of really thinking about how can we examine that? How might Ruth Bader Ginsburg's quote invite us to a different understanding, or at least to think about what's behind the question? But then there is a third answer, and I think that answer is also a valid one and actually can make this question really tender and personal. And that is that we do all seek to see our identity reflected back in the leadership of the institutions that we care about. And in that way, I completely agree that seeing gender diversity in leadership, in ministerial and staff leadership and board leadership is important. The same is true of seeking racial diversity, diversity of sexual orientation, or of gender expression. So not just gender identity, but how that gender is expressed, or expanding beyond the binary of male, female in gender orientation and expression. And that is a real thing, right? Like that is a real and tender thing, to want to see our identity reflected as we look at the leaders of our institutions. And so that's my third answer, right, to the question, is that's important to me as well, even despite my second answer to the question, and I don't know, maybe related to my first answer to the question, that I do work very hard for that on staff over time, right? And when I think there's a particular identity that isn't represented well, I try to correct that, to provide that identity in leadership through worship associates or other visible roles on Sunday, to who contributes to the thinking of the congregation around our core questions and values, and to make sure that the identities represented within the congregation are represented within the leadership and the visible leadership of the congregation as well. So that's the third and also really true answer. So complicated, right? Multiple answers to that question, hopefully a little to think about. I'm going to wrap us up with a final question, which was, what is the thorniest spiritual question you have ever tackled, and what or who helped you to address it? So I asked the questioner, did they mean like the thorniest spiritual question I've tackled in a sermon or in my own life? And they said, I got to pick. So I'm going to wrap us up with my own life and what I have really experienced as one of the spiritual challenges of my life, which is what I would define as spiritual envy or jealousy. It's not exactly that I don't think I'm fine just as I am. I was raised UU in the 80s and 90s. I did internalize the concept that I am worthy, but rather that I wish I were also, that I see other, pastors or preachers or justice seekers or any of the roles that I seek to inhabit in the world, parents, and wish I could be more like that. Even when that is something I could never be. I'm not like that at all. This sort of came to a head when I was creating a vision board along with other colleagues, and we had all of these little printouts, like pretty attractive things we could cut up from magazines, I guess, and put them on our vision board. And I saw one of them and was just about to grab for it, but somebody else took it first, and he put it on his vision board. And I thought, oh my gosh, that vision board is going to be so much better than my vision board now, because he got that thing, and I wish I had gotten to it first. And it was a little motto surrounded by flowers, and it said, comparison is the thief of joy. And it was just about as I was thinking how upset I was that I didn't have that on my vision board, that I thought I might need to continue some spiritual work in this area. So I would say it's ongoing. I don't know that I've addressed it completely, but now you all know about it, and you can help me, which is what we do in community together. We ask questions, we answer them with each other. We disagree on the answers. We come up with even better answers based on the ideas we've brought forward. And we help each other tackle our thorniest spiritual questions. So, that was a lot. Thank you for being with me through it.
All right, yes. Videos are going to be hard.
Hello. All right, well, we've had hymn requests, and I know Blue Boat Home is a favorite, and so I thought we would sing that one, and I believe that Reverend Amanda's going to put the words in the chat. I'm going to do my best to sing and play at the same time, but, bear with me, because you're going to probably have to sing the notes that I'm not going to sing. So how many verses are we doing, Reverend Amanda? 2? All 3? Okay. All right, so Blue Boat Home, and please, again, bear with me and sing along.
Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The ship's companion, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the light of the heavens and the beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Raise your hand if you sang along. Yay! Thank you.
Friends, from this Sunday and ending on Saturday, June 19th, 70% of the offering that we take will be split between Our Lady Queen of Peace Food Pantry and the Randolph School PTA. These two groups directly serve the 22204 zip code, literally our own backyard. UUCA has worked with the Randolph PTA in the past, helping families whose children attend the school. And Our Lady Queen of Peace Food Pantry provides food for Arlington residents and does not require paperwork from those in need. So people without documents can receive this help. Now, there are so many ways to pledge through our website, by text, the Give Plus app, by mailing a check, and please share the plate in the memo line. And as you're making donations, remember, 30% goes to the continuing mission of UUCA. 70% goes directly to the people in need. I ask you, please, give accordingly and consider adding just a little extra to your gift this week. Let us be so grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts with us. We are enriched by their giving. And let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others. Blessed be, and may it be so.
So we had a request for Wake Now My Senses, which is also sung to the tune of Be Thou My Vision. And I believe that the words will be in the chat. And we're going to sing verses 1 and 2. It's a beautiful hymn and a beautiful Irish melody.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your view, giving, receiving.
you.
There is a favorite quote from Rainier Maria Rilke that I return to time and again. And I want to just leave it with you as our benediction. This is from a larger piece. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue. Be patient, friends, toward all that is unsolved in your heart. Keep asking questions, keep bringing them here to this community, and we together will look for answers. May it be so. Sophia, do you have a final piece for us?
I do. We did have another request for Finlandia, and I thought maybe we'll just sing one verse of that, which is a beautiful hymn by Sibelius, and it's 159. This is my song, and let's sing verse 1.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and wide. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine.
And I'll just read the words to verse 2 because they're so true, especially for today. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land as for mine. And this is just kind of a bonus song because I think it's a great closer. But speaking of that land, let's just do a verse of Come and Go With Me to That Land, and that'll kind of get everybody going. Feel free to move along and clap along, sing along, dance along. Here we go. Come and go with me to that land.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound.
There'll be freedom in that land.
There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land.
everyone.